Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Cord Cutting Hits the Enterprise. My name is John Finch, and I'm from DIALPAD. I head up product marketing here, and I'll be your host today. Thanks for coming. Today's presenter is Brian Solis. We're very happy to have him with us today. Brian is Principal Analyst at Altimeter, a profit company. Brian, as many know, is an award-winning author, keynote speaker, anthropologist, and futurist. You can join Brian in the conversation at any time on Twitter at Brian Solis. In today's webinar, Brian will share the results of his latest research on the demise of the desk and the desk phone and the rise of the anywhere worker. Today we'll hear about how to adapt during the rise of the anywhere worker, how to realize substantial IT cost savings, why it's important for your organization, and it's time for your organization to cut the cord. In addition, there'll be a live Q&A session at the end, so please submit your questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom. At the end of that, we'll go through and go through all of those questions with you in real time. So again, Brian Solis, I'm your host, John Finch. A little bit on the research. DIALPAD and Lab 42 conducted a survey of more than 500 professionals across a diverse set of roles, company sizes, and industries. And the findings were compiled into a report by Altimeter, a profit company. And I'd like to actually hand it over to Brian Solis, who's going to walk you through all the results in this report. Brian?
Thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day to be with us here. It's a fascinating conversation because we all, in our own way, are on the go, and we all, in our own way, adapt to the circumstances when it comes to work. Not just in our personal lives, we're using technology in all aspects of our everyday life. And what I think makes this the most interesting time for this conversation is, for example, I'm hosting this webinar from the back of the History Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, and technology allows us to essentially do everything we can do in an office, and in some cases, more. So what we wanted to do was share the highlights of our research and the findings from our research, but more importantly, have a conversation, whether you're in HR or IT or whether you're an anywhere worker, as we call it. I think we have to bring about change from the inside of the organization. I often say that if we're waiting for someone to tell us what to do, we're on the wrong side of innovation. So let's talk about basically losing the desk and maybe losing the desk phone. I thought a natural way to do that was to apply what's happening in our homes and bring it essentially to the office. So if you are a Netflix subscriber, or if you use Roku or Apple TV or anything really, other than a television set with a cable or a set-top box or a satellite dish, you probably are accustomed with cord cutting. Cord cutting is the practice of canceling or foregoing cable television subscription or a landline telephone connection in favor of an internet-based or wireless service. It's called cord cutting. It's actually a thing. It is becoming increasingly a thing every single year, and this has big companies starting to panic, but not as greatly as they probably should. And that is because many people have a reluctant relationship with their providers simply because they never really thought about cutting the cord until they think about it. And once they think about it, it becomes blatantly clear that they should have considered this a long time ago. Why didn't I think about that? And it's just because of process and routine, and we've got a million other things to think about. But there are even calculators that show you what it would cost to get to save all of your money by doing the same exact things using a streaming device to your television. You wouldn't know the difference. Yet many people are doing this all the time, and this is now starting to play out not just in homes around the country, but homes around the world. I think about it. We're all on a webcast together. Some of you have dialed in from your smartphones. I've dialed in from my smartphone. I didn't even think to ask the museum if there was a landline. But this is just normal. And now more and more households are starting to cut their landlines. This is playing out into cable television. But the big thing, and these numbers are huge, right? 12% cut the cord in 2016. But more and more, we're starting to see this new breed of consumer not even think about subscribing to these services. It's just normal that they wouldn't, because they grew up or they operate digital first, mobile first, and the thought of having a set-top box is just honestly not even a consideration. You know, I study innovation in this process I call iteration. I think a lot of companies, when they're investing in new technology, they think they're being innovative, but what's really happening is they're being iterative. And iteration is using new technology to do the same things better or differently, but innovation is using new technology to create new value. And I think that's exactly what we have to think about when it comes to cord cutting. So for example, when you have a set-top box, many of you do, it comes with a remote control. And that remote control is nothing short of ridiculous. I've actually studied this. On average, these things have about 70 buttons on them. 70 buttons, right? If you look at the new Apple TV remote, it's a button for Siri, it's a trackpad, and it has a microphone input. But for the most part, it's completely simplified. The whole process mimics how you use other technologies in your life. And that, combined with things like Snapchat or Instagram or Line or WhatsApp, you're starting to learn how to communicate differently in your day-to-day life, and that's starting to spill into the enterprise. So these behaviors, we used to talk about the consumerization of IT. These behaviors are actually not only bringing new technologies into the enterprise or personal technologies into the enterprise, but it's bringing in what my friend Stowe Boyd used to call bring your own mind. When we talk about bring your own devices, it's the BYOM. You're bringing your own mind to work. You have this sort of condition, this routine, this process, this second nature, if you will, of how you communicate. And the equivalent of cable companies in the enterprise is, unfortunately, IT. That there's protocol, there's process, there's systems that are in place and have been in place for good reason, mind you, but this is now a struggle on all sides. Which side do you think is going to play out? Which side do you think is going to win? And we know how that goes, except it's like cord cutting in the home. Once it gets in your mind, it starts to grow and fester until it becomes all-consuming. This is a huge, huge deal that has yet to get its major airtime, but that's why we're bringing this to you in this, even though I helped write it, I think it's a fascinating report, and DIALPAD's making it free to download, but it is a completely different way of thinking. And I want you to think about it this way. So if you think about HR or IT, I mean, these are processes, these are roles, these are standards that have existed for pretty much decades, right? But what's happening outside of work is incredible advancement. I mean, you just blink and there's a new device, there's a new technology, there's a new app. Personally, I fly drones every single weekend, and a couple of years ago, it never would have occurred to me to become a remote vehicle operator. I have virtual reality goggles. A few years ago, it never would have occurred to me to put a big piece of glass on my face, but now it is the standard. But also at the same time, what's happening is you have people, human beings, who are connected all the time, everywhere they go. And this is creating this mindset. Without even thinking about it, people work and want to work anywhere. It's a different conversation than working from home. It's just simply that you can work anywhere. And once you have a taste of what it's like to work anywhere, that becomes the standard. That becomes your expectation. Just like a customer who uses, say, Uber as their app to go from point A to point B, they don't think about it. The app works. There's no transaction. It's just seamless. And that becomes a standard for customer experience. Without anybody really knowing it, every company in the world now, in their own way, competes against Uber for customer experience. And this is what's happening with employee experience. So what is an anywhere worker? Well, I'm an anywhere worker. Chances are you are too. It's somebody who can work anywhere. But IT and HR and management in general has an opportunity here to reimagine the future of work. And when we talk about the future of work, I don't want to think about just limiting it to Google free lunches, open workspaces. I want you to think about empowerment, rethinking what it takes to manage an employee and how an employee can be productive or more productive in a new paradigm. And that's what this conversation is about. The future of work, I think, requires architecture, it requires new perspective, it requires imagination and creativity. Otherwise, it's just iteration. We'll go to a cloud-based phone platform, but without reimagining what a phone is or what it should be, or thinking about the fact that we all are chained to our email. But what if Slack came along and you started to have threaded messaging? I bet you some of you are nodding like, oh my gosh, we love Slack. And it's incredible. Once you use it, it's very difficult to go backward. But at the same time, CIOs have to understand, just like cable companies are sort of covering their eyes and their ears, cord cutting is real. And that's starting to come not only into the enterprise, but it's just a way of working. It's natural for people to think about using their smartphone, even if it isn't sanctioned by IT. And that introduces so many problems into the organization. Number one, security. It's a huge risk to not sanction these devices as official parts of programs. And so you have not only bringing your own devices to work, but you have apps, you have services, you have all of these things that are coming from the outside in that are being used with or without your knowledge. People want to use these things because they use them not only in their personal lives, but they're really good at being productive. They're very efficient at this. They're using these technologies without even thinking about it. When you use technology and technologies that have been in the enterprise for years, I mean, some of the systems in your company today have been around since before the internet. So just the way of working, the user interface, the experience of a lot of these applications and systems and services and protocols and what have you is just not only archaic, but it's starting to completely affect how you work and how you think about work. So we know that employees are more empowered than ever to work from anywhere, right? I mean, remote working is a thing. It grew. There's debates as to whether or not you should be in the office, you should be at home. Point is that there's a balance. But there's also a balance in enabling and empowering your workforce in terms of device usage, right? So chaining them to a desk and a desk phone that's just an old way of thinking, to be honest with you. And it is what it is because it's just what we've always known. Outside of work, we're just always told, follow the rules, follow the processes. That's why they exist. They're proven. And yet we get caught up in this sort of routine every single day without looking at it. But when you start to look at it, you start to see what's playing out. Cord cutting is already starting to happen in the enterprise. And IT is wasting millions of dollars without doing something about it. So the point is it's happening anyway. Let's get in front of it. I mean, people are not sitting at their desk. I don't even have a desk. I have an office. I don't have a desk. But it's already happening. Everybody works from everywhere. I mean, many of you have probably worked from your local coffee shop. I was just thinking about a few years ago, I did a webcast from a passenger seat of a moving car. Just unbelievable the times in which we live. But I often say that, disruption and innovation is part technology, but it's also part anthropology, sociology, ethnography. I mean, the social sciences here are a really, really big deal, but I also want you to think about psychology and also philosophy. Most people believe their desk phone and their desk is obsolete. And why is this important? If they start to see these things as being obsolete, yet that is the standard of which they're given within their work, they start to bleed, that perception starts to bleed into work and the company and the management and the processes. And over time, whether they know it's happening or whether you know it's happening, and it festers and it grows and it starts to become this thing when somebody wakes up and says, wow, I need to find a new job. Or you're lucky if they try to bring it up to you to voice opportunities for the future of work. It's a given. People prefer their smartphone over a desk phone for business calls. It's a given that they're already doing that. Yet most companies insist upon placing this reluctant relationship, that is a desk and a desk phone, upon their employees. It costs money. These things are just sitting there being unused, costing millions per year, and I get it. IT has bigger things to think about. We have, though, this movement of no software, cloud, mobile, social, and IT is running around thinking about how to prioritize technology investments. Every aspect of work can be modernized. Every aspect of work, if you think about it, can be reimagined. And so something as simple as this creates a quandary, but largely goes overlooked because there are bigger fish to fry, or at least there is the perceived notion that there are bigger fish to fry. But this is one of those silent killers, if you will, inside the organization, inside the mind of your employee, inside the minds of your best talent, the people doing the best work. They're starting to think that there are better ways to do things. And they're going to voice their concern and they're going to voice their opinion. What do you do about it? Or for those most progressive organizations, can you get in front of it and lead the workforce in a new direction? We're all subject, regardless of what industry you're in, we're all subject to digital transformation. It's one of the biggest, most prolific trends in business right now, and that's leading change and modernization of technology, but also processes and systems across the enterprise. We also have what I call digital Darwinism, which is technology and society are evolving, right? So things like thinking my company is out of date because it puts a desk phone, doesn't let me use my smartphone, or gives me a desk. I mean, these are things that are starting to make companies vulnerable from the inside out. It's the same thing that's happening with customers, right? Customers are changing because of mobile and social and apps and empowerment, and they expect your company to cater to them in new and different ways. And the same thing that's happening to customers, well, those are also your employees in many ways. The same thing is starting to happen. What's also interesting is that employees are starting to bypass IT protocol for the sake of their own productivity, the sake of their own sanity, if you will. So it's not like they're trying to be difficult in work. It's just natural for them to want to work this way. So they do work this way. They're not IT professionals. They're not cybersecurity experts. They just want to get their job done their way as quickly and as efficiently and as delightfully as possible. So they're already starting to hack the way they work. IT knows this. Maybe they blink an eye at it. Maybe they have other priorities to consider. But it is a reality. They're already doing this. At the same time, IT has to really think about what's the biggest impact that I can have in my organization today. Right? IT has its own set of priorities, its own set of challenges that it's dealing with. Digital transformation is huge, and their tasked with also thinking about this across other aspects of the company. But what's unsaid in many ways, so if you don't work in IT, it's good to have a little bit of empathy for what's working or not working on their side, but what they're focusing on. There's sort of this unsaid rule that the CIO, for example, has 2 years to make a real big impact in the organization. This is one of the reasons why digital transformation is such a big deal. And in many cases, IT looks at things like ERP or CRM, other big movements to the cloud, which it's sort of prioritizing. But at the same time, pure cloud productivity, communication systems is, I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit, but let's call it low-hanging fruit for now. It is exactly how to get your employees more connected. And then the word that I think is so underestimated is motivated. Helping them work the way they want to, in ways that mimic their life, it's just natural, right? Otherwise, it's counterintuitive, and it makes them think about it every time they have to do something, and the more they have to think about it, the more it becomes a pain, and the more it becomes something that grows and grows and grows until somebody insists on change. I often say that the I in information technology, or the I in IT, should stand for innovation, right? Innovation in using new technology to redefine the future of work, to redefine work. IT can take that leadership. And at the same time, if anybody from HR is on this call, or if not, please bring them to this call or share with them this report. They too are part of the problem and part of the solution. I think together IT and HR has to make this a priority. But one of the challenges is that technology is in IT, right? The CIO stands for Chief Information Officer. It could stand for Chief Innovation Officer. And in order to be innovative, it can't just throw new technologies at what they conceive to be the problems. We have to see what are the actual problems, and then what are the solutions for those problems. So moving to a pure cloud communication system or platform solves a problem of which IT has not considered because it hasn't had to consider. This is why HR has to be involved, if possible, as well, in that human behavior, expectations, and preferences are at the root of unhappiness and productivity within the organization today. You look at any Gallup research poll, morale has never been lower. I think we're at historic lows. And part of that has to do with management, the way that people are managed, the way that people are cultivated or conditioned to work, but also aging technology processes, systems, just perspective. So anywhere workers are telling you or showing you the path, right? And so I actually believe, I'm a big believer in social science, I'm a big believer in the humanities, because it gives for you this opportunity for empathy and insight to do something that's human first and technology centered second. So, why is this a big deal right now? Why are we talking about desks and desk phones? People are going to start leaving. Just like customers are starting to leave you for startups and other companies that act like startups. It's just simply because it mimics their lifestyle. People would consider moving to a company that supports their mobility. It's just full stop, right? And companies are realizing that if they look at low-hanging fruit, things like productivity suites like G Suite or Office 365 or even Box is now getting into the game. Cloud productivity suites combined with pure cloud communication platforms will enable people to call, video conference, message on the go in secure environments. Right? It's just simply moving people in the direction that they're going, ... officially. I often study culture because culture is at the heart of every aspect of my research, whether it's digital transformation, whether it's innovation. It is always the inhibitor of progress. And it's simply because culture has become a manifestation of decades of process. Management is designed to scale and make things efficient, to improve how you work every single day. It's a solid, tried and true practice of iteration. But as we talked about with the Gallup reports and low morale across enterprises, not just in the U.S., but all around the world, having flexibility to work from anywhere improves happiness. What do you think improved happiness does? It's a no-brainer, right? It's so, there's that saying, right? Don't take it personal. It's just business. That's the exact way to shoot yourself in the foot, or worse, right? Of course it's personal. You spend all of your time working with less time with your friends and family and loved ones. So why wouldn't you want to be happy? Why wouldn't you want to be more productive? So now IT and HR have to partner to consider that these movements towards digital transformation can be more effective by simply solving some of these, what's considered today maybe smaller or less critical endeavors, because the best talent are obviously the connected talent, right? They're the ones who represent the future. They're the ones who are going to keep using technology and probably be more resistant to automation in the future. So of course you want to keep them or hire them, right? Because most people would make a decision to join a company based on their ability to be mobile, right? These numbers do not lie. They're so compelling that IT, the new IT stack, can actually boost happiness, which can boost creativity, which improves productivity. I mean, these numbers are incredible. In fact, it's the writing on the wall, but in this case, it's the writing on the screen. Of course, this should be an investment. Of course, you would want this. Of course, you would want to work for a company that thinks this way. Mobile communications can add at least 10% of productivity gains, right? Whereas companies today are dramatically losing productivity because the technology sucks, but so do the processes that support those technologies, or sort of the processes of work. When you go mobile, it starts to change everything. Processes change, they modernize, they're innovative. All aspects of work become innovative. You're always on, you're always plugged in. I actually believe, I study customer experience quite a bit, but culture and the future of work are big deals to me. I spent a lot of time with companies like Gaping Void, for example, thinking about happiness and using art and other unorthodox strategies to really get into someone's heart and mind to help them not only have better technology, but see that there are new ways to work that are personal. So just like many companies are prioritizing customer experience and mobile, right? If you consider what's the number one driver for customer experience and innovation, it's mobile. If you take a look at Google's micro moments, you'll see just how big of a deal it is, because the customer is increasingly mobile first, and in many cases becoming mobile only. So of course companies are prioritizing mobile in terms of customer experience, but the same thing is happening for employee experience. We need to boost morale, we need to boost happiness, we need to boost creativity, and we need to boost productivity. All of those things are just a net result of going mobile. This is not unlike any user-centered strategy, right? I mean, putting people first, customers and employees, ultimately saves time, money, headaches later, right? But more so, these efforts communicate to employees that their input is important. Who doesn't want to be heard? Who doesn't want to feel like they're being heard and that something's being done? These are little wins that have huge, huge impact. So if you're in IT, HR, or if you're not, make a case. Rally the troops. Review usage of existing systems for true impact on productivity and employee satisfaction. It doesn't hurt to survey employees, number one, to see how they feel, but two, before you start making huge investments in all of this stuff, get their input. Because if it affects how they work negatively, that takes away from the ROI. And lastly, we just have to stop thinking about us versus them, or traditional legacy-based IT perspectives or legacy HR perspectives. This is a new era, and we're seeing it all the time. This is about investing in the future of your work, the future of your workforce, the future of your competitiveness, which if you don't, and other companies do, you open yourself up for disruption, right? Disruption is going to happen to you or because of you. And we're all here together because we believe it's because of us. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to John to share a couple of quick case studies of what this looks like in practice so that we can see that, number one, it's tangible, but two, it does have ROI. So John, turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So I'm going to go through just a couple of case studies that are customers at DIALPAD that have gone through this digital transformation and are looking for solutions that allow for the mobility, the cord cutting, and just the adoption of anywhere work. One of the companies that we work with is based in Brooklyn, New York, named Huge, and they're basically a digital agency. They have got some pretty amazing clients that they work with from a design perspective. They have about 15 offices around the world and about 1,500 employees. They were looking for a solution that would really enable them to have 24/7 conferencing capabilities. In terms of some of the challenges they had were that they had this distributed workforce. They had a legacy conferencing system or solution that just was difficult to manage. It was difficult to collaborate with, and they had an enormous amount of heavy call volumes. So overall, they really needed a solution that could meet the demands of better connectivity and realize what they needed from an anywhere work perspective and increase collaboration between those remote locations. Ultimately, what they were able to achieve is pretty significant. So they didn't have to use any longer the desk phones, completely collaborating without phones. Cost savings approximately 80% when switching to DIALPAD, and really enabled them across the board to go to a 24/7 conferencing and collaboration solution across all of their different offices, which is pretty amazing. Another organization that realized kind of the dream in terms of moving to a modern business communication solution and cutting the cord is Betts Recruiting. The challenges that they have is really looking at their 5 offices, 142 employees, and really 50% of the base is a remote workforce. So having 50% of them working remotely really was the biggest challenge. They had a legacy PBX solution from a common provider that's out there, and addressed a very large amounts of call volumes. But the firm's decision to move to DIALPAD was inspired by its international work from anywhere culture, really. So with offices in San Francisco, Palo Alto, and London, New York, and Austin, they really needed a solution where they could depend on cloud-based tools to collaborate on the go. Results for Betts Recruiting significant as well. So moving to DIALPAD really inspired them to shift the way that the recruiters are collaborating with the other account executives and other people within the organization. About a 90% monthly cost savings overall, which is pretty significant, and moving from an already IP-based PBX, but really a true anywhere work collaboration mobile-first solution was their goal and what they're realizing there. Their call volume increased per user per month, which means that the adoption of the solution overall was significant. So rather than just having this clunky desk phone and using mobile phones and other chat applications that people might be using to bring to work on their own, they're actually using DIALPAD to do all that collaboration, and their text volume obviously increased significantly as well. So real-time collaboration and communications really became second nature to the efficiency across their productivity in their offices. So now let's move into some Q&A here, and we've got a few questions that have come through. And I'm just going to go through these, Brian, if you're still with me here.
I am.
Excellent. There's a question here on data security. The question is, it looks like document and data transfer between parties. Let's see on that one. If from data security perspective, I guess I can kind of answer that from a solution perspective. The way that DIALPAD's actually built and using the Google Cloud platform and just the use of the technologies across the board, we're actually able to manage and monitor all the data security and encrypt files, formats, voice, text, any recordings and chat messages that are coming through. So if the question really is around what is happening with data security, I think the solution today really is addressing those needs first and foremost. Brian, I don't know if you've got anything else in terms of just your experience overall with just general data security in document transfer and file sharings and things like that, in the experience of the survey or others.
I mean, your answer is exactly right on. The only thing that I would say is that it's if Google is compromised, for example, right, it's almost a death blow, right, and that it is the utmost priority for any of these companies to ensure integrity. I mean, it is. In fact, I would argue that many of these companies are probably outspending in terms of security than even some of the own traditional security companies.
Great. All right, thank you. Here's another question here. This is directed towards Brian. With your interest in studying culture, what kind of unexpected cultural effects occur in the workplace as workers use technology more frequently to communicate and meet face-to-face in an office or less frequently?
Well, if I hear the question right, and then John, check me if I didn't fully get it. Culture is a byproduct of what you manage against, and also what people do or don't do. And I also say that culture is a byproduct of the crap you tolerate and the way you reward people or don't reward people, or punish people or don't punish people. It's all very interesting. So technology usage is just a function of work. Where culture is becoming really interesting is if you look at people, expectations, preferences, behaviors, values, norms, you see that technology has sort of this quiet but then loud impact on changing those things at an individual level and then at a collective level. So, for example, the more connected you become, the more informed you become. The more informed you become, there's also this balance of the more misinformed you become. But you try to be very effective in taking that information and acting on it much quicker. The quicker you get, the more empowered you are. The more empowered you are, the more demanding you are. Demanding leads to sort of becoming more elusive. So following me on this chain, what happens is, before you know it, people are just different. They're just different in how they talk, what they want to do, what they value, their aspirations. And so these are the things that when you study it, you realize that if culture is sort of the sum of all of the parts, then we have to change how we harness technology and how we empower employees to work to push toward a culture that we want to have. I often use the culture as sort of this metric, looking at what it is in order to design against it. So depending on the connectedness of your employee, things like real-time meeting happen not only on the screen, but it also has this weird effect of bringing people to reality, right? Doing more face-to-face stuff as a nice break from technology. But I will say this, that what ends up changing is sort of your expectation of how you use that face-to-face time, right? I often say that, hey, I tried to be creative once, but I got stuck in meetings all day. No, I don't think anybody likes meetings. In fact, many people can blame Outlook for introducing the standard 1 hour. And when you put an hour on someone's calendar, the weird thing happens that you actually use it, even if you don't need it. And that leads to just waste of time, this hatred towards meetings. But when you become a connected employee and you're very efficient and you're mobile, when you have a face-to-face meeting, you're incredibly structured about how you want to use that time, so you come a little bit more prepared. You come with this idea that there's going to be outcomes, and then you go. And sometimes those meetings are 15, 20 minutes rather than 60 minutes. So there's this weird effect that sort of changes the dynamic of work, both just simply because a connected worker, just like the connected customer, blurs the line between the real world and online.
Great. Thank you, Brian. I think we can let's answer this one together, Brian. I'll let you go first. But how important is a productivity tools integration with a communication solution today?
Well, I mean, the answer is it's critical. But I mean, John, that's all you. You got this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the perspective of our customers and where we're seeing success in the marketplace is truly, the productivity tool then provides the individuals with context of the interactions that they're having on a regular basis. So rather than having to flip through emails or go to calendars or even documents for that matter, and in many cases just LinkedIn and the connections that you have across social media, it provides you with a singular view of all that information while you're in communication with that individual. And that communication really isn't just around voice, right? So it's texting, it's group texting, MMS and SMS inside and outside of your organization. So it really gives you all that information kind of in one view. And I would say that we see in many cases, as you saw with Bets Recruiting, the types of communications that individuals have and the context by which the high levels of productivity kind of come out of that is by being efficient and being able to capture all that information and then moving on to your next thing. The question here is, do we find that many companies are moving away from a company-provided cell phone plan to cloud-based business solutions that are built for mobile applications like DIALPAD? And I think you addressed this, Brian, when you talked a little bit about security and being able to manage a solution that the organization managed. But are you also hearing about organizations that are shifting away from providing these company-based cell phones and then people having to carry two cell phones around, one for business and one for personal?
Yeah. I mean, it's you'll always know the company that desperately needs to move towards a DIALPAD-like solution from the person carrying two phones, and one of them being a more modern, desired phone. It's interesting to me the extent of which companies haven't really considered things like just all-in programs, because there are often budget-based decisions using legacy standards as sort of the benchmark or your center of reference as to why you wouldn't provide a company phone, or if you do provide a company phone, why it isn't the phone that people would actually want. So I do think that there could be a sweeping opportunity here to just bring everything all into one master device, one master program. But what are you seeing, John?
I'm seeing the same thing. I think that you're absolutely right. And the number of organizations really see that switch, and it becomes one or the other. And then rather than having to have these mobile phones and people carrying two, I think we all saw for many years people carrying two phones, one for work and one for personal. And you don't see that as much anymore. There's some organizations that maybe still haven't fully embraced the cloud or applications on a mobile phone without complete control by the organization. But eventually that's changing. It's changed in certain vertical industries that we've seen over the course, like financial services, and other, technology companies that were extremely concerned about security. But I think from that perspective, the security elements that go into cloud-based services have become much greater than any singular organization can manage on their own, and this just becomes part of that transition. I'm going to go to another question here. What numbers have you seen for adoption of video conferencing instead of traveling for meetings? Ryan, have you run across a lot of that?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question. I mean, I think like anything, right? If it's something that can be handled virtually, it's handled virtually. I also see I've been in a lot of meetings where these robots on wheels have come in to the conference room with the face of the person who's participating and controlling it from wherever they are, just so that they could sort of give the semblance of being there in the rooms. But I've also seen at the same time these needs, because of the virtual aspects of engagement, these needs to sort of bring the human network together. So they'll have strategic offsites for teams to have programs face-to-face, or to have a series of sessions that are face-to-face. So I just sort of see this balance. What about you, John? What are you saying?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think it really becomes that balance. I agree with you. And yeah, I would agree. Here's another question here. It seems like the anywhere worker is as much a cultural shift as a technical shift. Do you find that any recommended resources for making and maintaining that culture?
I think culture is like a relationship. If you were to ask someone on the outside how they see that relationship, they're probably going to be the one to give the better overview of it, because we sort of tend to see the world not as it is. We tend to see the world as we are. And that sort of gets in our way of sort of viewing things. Right? We sort of have this cognitive bias that sort of forces us to see things the way we want to see them. I know this is like a bit of a philosophical intro or setup to the answer, but I want to make that clear, because for context, the way I look at culture is it's by design. In the same way I think about the word experience. If you're going to have an experience, whether it's an employee or as a customer, experience happens, right? You're going to have an experience regardless of if it's designed or not. So why wouldn't it be designed so that it could drive and lead the type of experience you want people to have, and more importantly, what you want them to share? So culture is by design. Technology plays a role, but so does experience architecture. In a lot of my side work and research that I've done, and by side I mean I'm always experimenting on these fronts, we look at ways to cultivate happiness, just like Zappos, for example, because happiness is a big part of employee experience. It's intentional, it's purposeful. It requires management to continue to make it purposeful, to make it fun, to make it exciting, to make it dynamic, and all of those things become the culture. So it requires a dedicated approach, and one of which I don't think businesses understand yet or appreciate yet, because, and look, this is just a sweeping generalization, but I think that executives don't prioritize it simply because they don't live the business the way that customers and employees live the business, because they're shareholder-centric, maybe they're stakeholder-centric, and so that is that cognitive bias that doesn't let them see what the culture is. Yet it is the number one catalyst, I believe, for innovation moving forward, and so it takes design, and we should prioritize it.
Great. Here's a question that comes from higher ed application. Most workers in higher ed or universities are not mobile. So working from coffee shops, etc., would make more people happy, or working away from their office or their other buildings would make them happy. I guess I can kind of take that one. We've worked with a number of organizations, like Denison University, for example, in Ohio, where they are shifting and have shifted much of their legacy solutions to DIALPAD, because they're looking for new ways to communicate both internally and work from anywhere, but also to collaborate with students and other faculty and staff. And so the organization really was taking a look back at, like, what are all the things that they need to do to sort of modernize their IT infrastructure and their IT stack. I think some applications and other tools that they were using internally also were a part of this larger vision that's going on there at the CIO's level. So it's very innovative in the fact that, in making those shifts and kind of simplifying those communications across the board, it really wasn't looking at it from an anywhere work perspective, even though now faculty can text with students easily if they'd like to. There's some faculty that won't maybe ever do that and just answer phones, or they have executive assistants or departmental assistants that are answering calls for them. So some of that kind of legacy operational behavior can still be in place, but so can the more one-to-one interactions that they need to have, or even having a one-on-one video call, for example, instead of having to just talk over the phone if the professor and the student weren't on campus at the same time. So it just provides that flexibility, and once the organization or the university shifts to sort of more of an anywhere work philosophy, and kind of is by design naturally, now they can take advantage of it rather than just being stuck at, for office hours or at a desk phone, which just accumulates a bunch of voicemails or only email collaboration. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Brian, at all.
No, I mean, you kind of nailed that one.
Very good. Just looking through the last set of questions. If anyone has any questions they'd like to submit, go ahead and do that right now. We're just at 10 minutes to the top of the hour. Just pacing through some of these here. Let's see. So Brian, this one might be directed towards you. You commented on the fact that results show employee happiness is based on the kinds of productivity and communications tools they use within their enterprise or within the university. I hear it is also true that prospective employees are choosing to join organizations or companies based on these tools. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, once you taste something, it is the standard, right? If I often say that as an example, once you use Uber or Lyft, you probably don't go back to using taxis unless you absolutely have to. And even if you do, you acquiesce, you fully acknowledge that you're taking a step backwards. And it's a feeling and it's a sense, and more so it's an experience. And the same is true for work. Once you taste a way of talking, messaging, working, these things become the standard for expectations, and you suddenly start to see the world differently. And so every day is a matter of time before archaic systems become too much for someone to handle, and people take control over their experiences and also their destiny, and say, it's not a place for me, and they start looking. It's any one trigger that can get people to look. And the sad thing, and also the important thing about this, is that your connected employee is probably, in many ways, your most valuable prospect for the future. You think about the skills and the expertise that we have today versus what we're going to need to compete tomorrow. These are the people who are most likely dynamic and willing to, and probably will, try and do new things as time evolves. So I would dramatically improve our awareness of this, or increase our awareness of this, and then start to act on it as quickly as possible. Because those steps are, when you look at culture and you look at digital transformation, you look at innovation, like from my perspective, this is all I study. These are the types of data points that are like, duh. Of course, this is why companies go under. This is why the best talent leaves. This is why recruiting of the best talent, for example, in Silicon Valley is a huge initiative and a huge priority. And it's hard because most organizations, they use technology because they have to, and they haven't considered the human aspects of it because it's never been necessarily part of most organizations. But if you look at history, outside of technology, consistently the best brands and the best companies have always been those that have put people first, and it's just applying those philosophies here with technology and people to compete for the future right now.
Excellent. And I think we have time for one more quick question. Should IT leaders take more of a grassroots approach in vetting and adopting the technology that employees have started using on their own? Or should IT be proactive and anticipate the technologies they want in order to standardize and have more control? So maybe utilizing in small groups, like things like Slack, for example. What do you think about that, Brian?
I mean, it's probably both. I think I see this in customer experience, and I'm really trying to accelerate my depth of research on the employee experience side. But on customer experience side, empathy is sort of the catalyst. It's the thing that gets things to move, right? And this is why, for example, I spent the last 2 years doing research with Google around micro moments. And the thing that makes it such a huge opportunity is that when customers use mobile, first they have to go through the customer journey, and many companies have a horrid customer journey on a mobile device, right? Even if you have a responsive website or if you have an app, whatever, they're still designed based on legacy principles. They're not designed with, say, the same genius that goes into Tinder or Snapchat, and as a result, customers have to painfully endure that if they really want to do business with you, and there's a time where they're just not going to. So the best leaders in customer experience are becoming empathetic simply by going through the customer journey the way a new customer would, and putting this human experience at the forefront. So the same is true for employees. You have to feel how they work or how they can't work, what frustrates them. Otherwise, you're just never going to make the right decisions, or you're not going to make decisions that are going to have a real impact because you'll be off in terms of why you're doing them. So I always believe that technology is an enabler, but you need purpose. And to give you that purpose, you need empathy.
Great. And just one final question to close out on the whole theme here. Do you believe the desk phone will no longer have a place in office communications of the future?
Anything tethered to something has no place in a mobile world. And I just dropped the mic on that one.
Yep. Great. Well, I just want to thank you, Brian, so very much for working with us on this study and working with us on this webinar. And for everybody that participated, we've got additional questions and we'll respond to these as well. But we've hit kind of the limit here. This has also been recorded, and we'll be simulcasting this going forward for other folks on your teams or other individuals that you want to share this with. But we greatly appreciate everyone's time today. And everyone's super busy, so I had a great turnout, and look forward to talking with everybody again very soon.